Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have Alex Kahn, who's a real expert in recruiting, heading up the e-com recruiting team at Stott and May with a big emphasis on Salesforce Commerce Cloud and headless. Welcome, Alex. Super excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kailin. Really excited to have a good conversation with you and just talk about all things e-commerce, technology, recruitment, and the whole nine yards. Super excited to be on today. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I always like to kick it off with learning a bit more about your experience. Obviously, you're heading up a very key division at Stott and May. So maybe talk to us a bit about your journey in e-com and how you ended up in the role that you're in today.
Sure, absolutely. So just a little bit about me for starters. So I'm an e-commerce recruitment consultant at a niche third-party recruitment firm by the name of Stott and May, where everything I do is geared towards building out internal teams at both consultancies as well as retailers within the Salesforce Commerce Cloud space, the headless commerce / composable commerce space, as well as the Shopify Plus space, right? And so I've been within this community working in a recruitment capacity for the past 5 years. Really enjoying the space because something I really wanted to do right out of college was, use my voice, use my personality, in a sales capacity. But, I was never into like car sales or anything like that. Like I really wanted to make a long-term impact. And another really key aspect was I wanted to talk to cool people, for lack of a better phrase, on a day in, day out. And so I kind of just stumbled within e-commerce, that field, to be perfectly honest with you, and then ultimately just fell in love with a lot of the brands and subject matter experts that I've had the opportunity and the luxury of working with over the past 5 years. So, we do both contract as well as permanent recruitment over here. So, really have the full gambit, the full suite of experience when it comes to recruiting within the e-commerce niche. So, that's just a little bit about, my journey, but happy to dive further into it throughout the conversation.
Yeah, and one topic I typically like to ask most of my guests is, talk to me a bit about your perspective on whether e-com and retail teams should build an in-house team of center of excellence around engineering, or should they lean on agency partners? So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
It's very situational, right? And it really comes down to case-by-case scenarios because there's value to both sides, right? And just to get into a couple of the way I like to have this conversation, because this is, like you touched on, right? This is a very widely talked about topic. And so the way I like to do it is just get into the pros of each side, right? And so in particular, like to focus on the internal team to start, right? There's a handful of added benefits of having an internal team. I think the number one value add of having an internal team support your website is just having more ownership over the work that's being done, right? Like you have, a better grasp of the systems that are being worked on. Always the internal team's always going to leave the code in a better spot than where they left it, even if it goes beyond the scope that they were initially given. That's just the innate characteristics of a good engineer, right? And then beyond that too, there's also, the added bonus of just being more invested into the brand's site, right? The company long term, right? It's something that you work for, especially if there's like an equity element in, their employment there. They feel like they own it. And, engineers are people too, right? And so there's always going to be that element of attachment to what they do. And I've heard, numerous times of an engineer referring to a website as like their child, right? Like something that they really cultivated over time and things of the sort there. So you get those added bonuses on that end. There's also the opportunity of having an internal team to really upskill the team in other areas that they might not have initially been hired for, right? Like, hey, we really want you to understand beyond just the e-commerce side of the business, but also like the ERP side, or whatever other side, OMS side of the organization, et cetera, right? So we want to create a long-term value in making this internal hire by having that internal ownership of what's being done, right? So on the internal side, those are some value adds. On the external side, there's a couple things to run through as well, right? You have the opportunity to really bring in expertise, right? You go to an agency for to bring in a team and have somebody to support your site where you're not upskilling them, you're not training them how to do it, right? Their odds are they're already going to have like exposure to the latest and greatest technology within the space. They know what out of the box is as of today, not as of, hey, when I first started, or something of the sort there, right? They also have a large network of resources at their fingertips, right? Like when you work with an external firm, you're paying to get the job done, right? And so there's not going to be a ramp up time. If there's ever a situation where they get stuck on something, they can always turn to their boss, right? Or another subject matter expert that they're sitting next to and saying, hey, I'm stuck on this and I have a deliverable that I have to do. So can you help me get this done, right? That might not always be the case for the internal engineer. But at the same time, too, something else that's a value add to the external team is going to be just helping reduce like anybody getting overwhelmed, helping with the internal team's bandwidth. Hey, if we're focused on a really large initiative, I don't really want the internal team to get distracted with, some of this low-hanging fruit. Let's give that off to the agency, right? So I think that there's value to be had on both sides. Something I will note is over the past, particularly within the Salesforce Commerce Cloud space, over the past like 12 to 18 months, we've definitely seen a larger culture shift from these retailers relying on an external vendor, right? Like a consultancy, less of a reliance there and more of a desire to build out an internal team. And part of the reason we've seen that is just due to the fact that a lot of the retailers we've seen make that kind of culture shift. I felt as though they were upskilling, like people, they were giving these agencies access to, hey, we want to upgrade to the latest and greatest tech within a space, whether it be PWA kit or if they're in a Site Genesis environment, upgrading to SFRA. And they felt like, hey, they would get that A team to do that upgrade. And then once the upgrade was completed, now in comes the B, C team, for lack of a better phrase. And so then they lose that talent, right? And so that was something that a lot of the retailers I'm like connected with were getting really frustrated about, right? When it comes to, hey, if I just had this internal, then yes, they would have seen the website grow. And then we would be able to then further customize on top of it, as opposed to a revolving door of who's working on the website and things like that. And I guess that also brings me back to another added bonus of the internal team is you always know who's working on your website. It's not just like a one point of contact within a consultancy. Sure, you can absolutely find like more boutique size consultancies where it's like, hey, I'll know the entire internal engineering team. But oftentimes at the enterprise level, you might turn to one of the larger consultancies and you won't know everybody who's in your code and things of the sort there. Sometimes that rubs, executives the wrong way, particularly like directors of engineering or somebody who's really grown through the ranks within their internal organization, really cares about their website. So those are just some tidbits. More than happy to elaborate further if you want. But yeah, just from a high level, there's advantages of both sides. I wouldn't recommend like holistically, just a blanket statement, hey, go for one, go for the other. Again, it really is a case by case situation, but yeah, that's just kind of like a high level overview.
And it's funny you say that because sitting on my side of the table, I've seen a lot of those behaviors as well. I think a lot of the things that you'd mentioned are really important. So if you flip over and you're building out a new instance, you replatform to a great platform like Ecommerce Cloud. Effectively, there's a lot of tribal knowledge that goes into the build. And then there's a lot of tribal knowledge that goes into the maintenance. And like you'd mentioned, like when you see employee turnover, there's some information. Hey, why did we do this that way? Right. From a process standpoint, that kind of go out the door. So I think that was a great insight.
And just one thing I would add too is like, you're not always going to have the opportunity on either side for that knowledge transfer. Right. And so that's something that, a lot of times you just kind of lose it, if that internal individual like leaves, whether they're on the agency or the consultancy side. So a really good recommendation is to always be ironclad with your documentation phase, right? Like really get like the engineers, have a good who can really captivate why the work is being done in the way it is, so that nobody later down the line, end up breaking something that really shouldn't be broken.
Makes a ton of sense. And when you look at working with these directors of engineering or these VP of engineering, how do you make sure that you're finding the perfect candidate for them? And maybe let me broaden that question up. If I'm a director of engineering who's looking to hire for my team, how do I find that perfect candidate that's going to be productive and fit my culture?
Absolutely. So I guess to start, the first thing that, we look to do is really get a good understanding of where your tech stack is today, right? What kind of technologies are being worked on internally? What kind of projects are upcoming in your pipeline, right? Not just from like, hey, this is why I need to make this hire today, but hey, what's the long-term roadmap that you have in place, as it stands, right? Because ultimately, like you can make a hire that has all the right skill sets, right? That fits your problem or something of the sort like that today. But especially if it's a long-term hire, right? And it's a full-time position you're looking to fill, you want to ensure that, hey, this person has a familiarity with, what's upcoming, right? Whether it's a buy online, pick up in store that you're looking to do in, next holiday season, right? Not this holiday season, next holiday season. That's a 2025 objective or something of the sort there. You want to bring in somebody who at least has a soft understanding of that they don't need to be upskilled, right? And so when it comes to, really identifying the top talent, you really want to have a good understanding of where is the tech stack today? Where are we looking to take the tech stack tomorrow? And you also want to have a comprehensive understanding of the limitations of your environment, as well as what you can provide to that individual. Because we just went, right, Kailin, we just went through the fact that like you don't always have the opportunity to do that knowledge transfer, right? And so it's so critical to, retain the people, right? Like it's one thing to recruit, it's another thing to retain, right? And so you want to understand what are the limitations of my environment, right? I've spoken with certain, senior directors, VPs of engineering, et cetera, right? Who are like, listen, like we're in a legacy environment. I don't know if we can get like the board or like, the business stakeholders within the organization to upgrade this from legacy. So you want to be explaining upfront, right? And very candidly, hey, this is where the tech stack is. I'm hoping to get it to this stage, but there's no promises. So you can set that because we all know how challenging it is to make a good hire. So why put yourself in a situation where you need to make that good hire multiple times, right? You want to ensure that you're getting it right, right out of the gate. And so you're not needing to go back and fix any steps or dot any I's or cross any T's post back.
Yeah, no, that was a great question. It was essentially as a hiring manager, how do you evaluate? And I think what you're flagging, which makes a lot of sense, is there's like two elements. There's like the cultural element of somebody and how they fit in their team, but it's also where's your tech stack today? Where is it going? Where do the person's skills lie? And then does that actually align to your technology roadmap, right? Because you could bring in the right person, but just at the wrong time for where you are in your tech evolution. Someone's stuck on site gen. They know they're not going to headless, and the person wants to only work on headless projects, right? Like it might be a good culture fit, but a bad tech fit. And I think that's a really, really good call out.
And something else that's a really good point too. Something where I see hiring managers make a mistake is, their prerequisite is the culture fit, right? Are the soft skills, right? And where the soft skills are extremely important, you need to make sure that the hard skills are there first, right? That needs to be the first prerequisite because I've also seen people who make the mistake of, trying to bring on the Salesforce Commerce Cloud side, trying to bring in like a senior JavaScript engineer and then not realize 6, 7, 8 months down the road, like, well, like upskilling this person actually costs an arm and a leg. And there's a really wide ramp up period of time for this individual. And so just having to understand it, and it's totally fine to do something like that, as long as you have the bandwidth to say, okay, I appreciate that this person's probably going to take quite a bit of time to get fully ramped up. And as great of a person as they might be, as much as they might fit into, your short-term, long-term vision, you need to ensure that, hey, the hard skill sets are there. We're not talking about, on the SMCC side, we're not talking about bringing in a Salesforce Marketing Cloud engineer and trying to get them caught up to speed in SMCC because, I went to this person's wedding, or, I drink a beer with this guy or something of the sort there, right? Like, again, that's good. That absolutely is something that you want to be vetting for. But you just want to make sure that, the candidate pool you're vetting has those hard skills that, are business critical and, are tied into what you're actually looking to accomplish with this hire, right? And so, and most of the time too, like a lot of those soft skills, you're going to be coming into permanent positions as opposed to like freelance or contracting positions as well, right? Because that's more of a situation where it's like, hey, we need somebody to just come in, execute this project, whether it's like compliance, we need to be more compliant, or whatever the situation might be. We just need this project done. And so oftentimes I see hiring managers will, for somewhat forego the culture, the soft skill element, so long as the hard skills are there. Soft skills really do come in for these long-term hires, right? 3 to 5 years and beyond is how long they want them in the position. And so, yeah, really important to have. And I think that it's also good to understand like these individual skill sets, more holistically, right? Because I think in today's day and age, and I hope you agree with me, Kailin, but I think in today's day and age, a lot of titles have been kind of watered down, right? Especially off the back end of COVID, right? Where it was like, hey, the limelight really shifted from brick and mortar retail to, the digital storefront. I need a website that performs. We no longer have the foot traffic we used to have. And so I need to attract talent however I possibly can. So let me bring in somebody with their desired title, right? Or somebody might be in an environment for 5-10 years, which is becoming more and more rare, candidly, in today's day and age. But they might be in a role for a really long time and, might not have received the bumps and titles that, they genuinely do deserve. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who are at like a senior developer level or like a mid-level developer level, but then the work they're doing is more equated to like what a technical lead is doing, or even sometimes a technical architect. And the same could be said on the opposite side too, where I'll speak to an architect and I have to tell them, listen, man, like we can look for architect position, but I think you're going to be hard pressed to get an offer on that side because a lot of your responsibilities are more core hands-on development, less putting together digital roadmaps, documentation, and like with those architectural responsibilities. And so just having a wider appetite on who you're speaking with. Again, so long as they have those hard skills on paper that you can vet and see, okay, this person looks viable. Let me have a conversation with them. And then just getting a good understanding of like what their day in the life is, right? Like, are they overseeing like the sprint cycles, releases, things of the sort there? Do they manage a team? Are they managing like an external vendor, right? That's something that's really important too, where an internal team might not be in place, but you could have an engineer that's overseeing all the offshore like developers or the entire like developers from the external agency. And it really works hand in hand. Maybe not as much from like the cultural perspective, like, oh, I've experienced like managing personalities and things of the sort, but from the hard skill set, they'll have those experiences, conducting code reviews and mentoring like people who might be a little bit more junior, or who might not know their tech stack all that well. And so they can still embody a lot of the characteristics of, what a good lead developer might look like, even though they might be a senior developer or a mid-level developer without an internal team in place, on paper, but in reality, they're doing way more work. So just want to add that tidbit.
You touched on a couple different really interesting things. I think the first thing that you said that stuck out to me is during COVID, people were cranking the titles and the salaries to match the supply constraints. Like you mentioned, and we saw it on our end too, a lot of budget got flipped from brick and mortar to digital. All of a sudden, it became the biggest store. You have to triple your team, buy a bunch of tools, potentially replatform. And that kind of drove a craze. So you're right. There's actually, I've done a lot of hiring for our go-to-market side at Noibu, and you interview some people that had a VP title or had a director title, but in reality, they were doing a lot of individual IC tasks, right? And it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be a good VP or they wouldn't be a good IC. It's just to your point, like titles, you have to really dig deep because titles don't tell kind of the full picture. in most cases, I find as well. So that's a really, really good thing to actually extract. Maybe give us some tactical questions that you've used in the past that hiring managers could use to really tease apart someone that might be at level X from a skill standpoint, but 2-3 levels above from a title and comp standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big things, something else that is as a preface to this is that it's different within each space, right? Like Shopify will have its like common questions, Salesforce Commerce Cloud will have it, and same with Headless, right? But to focus in mostly on the Salesforce Commerce Cloud space, because I feel like that's a lot of this audience here. One of the early questions that we look to ask candidates is how much of their time do they find working within Business Manager, right? Working on content slots, content assets, setting up promotions versus doing like what we like to call core Commerce Cloud development here, right? Which is more ISML, right? Building link cartridges, things of the sort there, right? Integrating third-party payment processors, because there's, especially right before COVID, I can't really put a pin off the top of my head when it started, but there was a lot of like academies that were going on in the Salesforce Commerce Cloud space where, a lot of the agencies were trying to upskill either fresh grads or, like I mentioned, just general JavaScript developers and try to lower the barriers of entrance within SFCC from a hands-on development capacity, right? And so, unfortunately, a lot of the retailers weren't willing to, pay an hourly rate to upskill those individuals, right? And so now there's a percentage of, developers, US based or North American based, I should say, developers who have SFCC developer, senior SFCC developer in their title. But in reality, all of the extent of their exposure to the platform is, business manager work, which, unfortunately, especially with the introduction, Salesforce is introducing concierge commerce, right? Which is less clicks within Page Designer, right? They're upgrading Page Designer. And so it's unfortunately making it easier for business users to work within Business Manager on SFCC. So it's effectively, eliminating the need to bring in a junior developer. A developer who only has exposure to Business Manager and maybe not some of the heavy lifting that's being done on JavaScript controllers, pipelines, again, third-party payment processor, API calls, things of the sort there, right? And so that's one of the big things to start with is how much of your time is spent. How is that time divided? Another aspect too is to just, that's one step in, right? The step before that is to understand like, are they within SFCC truly, right? And Salesforce is adjusting verbiage, what feels like on a regular occasion right now, with regards to Salesforce Commerce Cloud, right? And so it goes from Demandware to SFCC to then now it's Salesforce B2C commerce, right? We're seeing composable commerce being introduced. And so getting a clear understanding of, because we also have a Salesforce core team here too, right? That does that type of recruitment. And so, we get a lot of applicants from that side that come to us looking to break into e-commerce. And so one of our initial very onset like questions is, how much work are you doing with Apex Lightning, right? And if the answer is anything, like I touch it on a day, week to week kind of basis, odds are that's probably going to eliminate them from a lot of the SFCC positions, right? Because where there is commerce on core, there really are only a very, very limited amount of environments out there today that are actually doing that and have actually adopted that. And so if they're working with Apex Lightning on a regular basis, odds are they're not going to be a Commerce Cloud developer. It's such a unicorn, of an ask. Like even today, like, a tougher search is more, I would just say candidly, a tougher search is like even finding somebody with Salesforce Commerce Cloud and Solemn, right? Or Salesforce Order Management, right? That's not like those are a dime a dozen, right? There are definitely people out there who have that exposure. And, if you do have that exposure, let's get in touch because it's a great skill set to have. But when it comes to, hey, I'm a really strong Commerce Cloud developer who's also an ASAT, Apex or Service or Marketing Cloud development, those people are very, very limited. Like I can probably count on a couple hands at most, how many people out there actually exist who are in that. right? So a couple of those like more disqualifying questions, right? Business manager versus core, as well as like, commerce cloud versus core. We also like to ask candidates like what their level of exposure is to SFRA. Sometimes candidates will kind of oversell themselves a little bit, saying, oh yeah, like all I do is work at SFRA, right? But it's unpacking that. Okay, how long have you been in SFRA? How many times have you actually, upgraded pipelines to controllers or something of the sort there? We also like to ask questions that are along the lines of, when it comes to SFRA development, like what role are you playing, right, within the greater team? Because when it comes to these enterprise level retailers, what we'll see is they'll tend to silo off the engineers in their work capabilities, right? So I've seen engineering teams on the brand side that are broken down into front end and back end, sure. And I've also seen those same teams who are broken down into front end being front end content, front end like core, and that core commerce cloud, and then back end as just back end. And I've even seen checkout teams, right? And it gets further complex.
Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, I've seen as well. And it's interesting you say that, because often what we've found too is that there's a lot of developers that work on the brand side that are actually engineering managers for the offshore team, but they have titles of front end development. So it's really important to really dig in so that you know what you're getting, right? There's obviously skills. There's skills that are valuable in any of those scenarios, but making sure that you align that with what the business is looking for. Alex, this has been an amazing conversation. As we look to sign off today, I wanted to thank you for your time. I think there's a lot of hiring managers out there that are going to listen to this and really learn a ton. So, Alex, wanted to thank you for your time and appreciate it. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Through LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my LinkedIn page is a great way to find me, Alexander Khan, KHIN on LinkedIn. I'm also easily found on email, alex.khin@stottandmay.com. So yeah, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Super passionate about this area, right? So I'd love to, even if it's just a casual intro call to understand the landscape more, I'm here for conversation like those. So again, really appreciate you having me on, Kailin, and putting me on the podcast and giving me a forum to talk about what, I'm so passionate about and what I love talking about. All right.
Awesome. Thanks again, Alex.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.